Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to R.A.R.E. Real Answers for Real Experiences. I'll be your host for this channel, Boulanger, and this channel is totally geared towards the intersection between faith and mental health. Let's get started. So, this episode is going to be connecting the dots between faith and mental health. We're going to talk about what is mental health, what is emotional health, and where does faith play a part, or does faith play a part in healing and recovery from unwellness. Well, let's talk about mental health. Mental health is a highly debated subject, highly scrutinized subject, and there is a lot of applications to helping people get better, live well. A lot of applications. CBT, DBT, uh, talk therapy. There's things like EMRD, which I never recommend. There's tons and tons of things that are out there to help people live well or get better. But the fact of the matter is, the missing component is faith. Does faith play a part in mental wellness? Does the scriptures play a part in mental wellness? Do the scriptures even address mental wellness? Well, we believe so, and we'll talk about how. But first, let's start with mental health. Mental health is a subject that many have tried to define, and many people, many practitioners live out through the DSM 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And the part of the reason why the DSM manual has continued to make new versions is simply because mental health or mental unwellness, I might say, has continued to explode, has rapidly grown and grown and grown. So you need new books to address what people believe are new issues. But personally, being in the mental health field for 23 years, the last 20 as a clinician, what I'll tell you is that they're not new diagnosis. I don't believe there's new diagnosis. I think that with old diagnosis, excuse me, practitioners and researchers have run out of ways to tell you what's wrong with you. They've run out of ways to tell people, instruct people, teach people, train people how to help you. And so the biggest part of that, I believe, is that they have left out faith, right? So many parts of the world, specifically in the US, are just against faith, talking about faith in counseling, talking about faith in therapy, talking about faith in recovery. And so what we're going to do is make that intersection happen. So mental health, I believe mental health is simple to understand. Mental meaning how we think, health is the state or condition of. So when we put those two terms together, mental and health, we're just simply talking about the state or condition of how we think. That's just it, right? And so really what it comes down to, if my thinking is bad, then my behavior will be bad. That's just the truth. If my thinking is good, then the condition of how I behave, the state of how I behave, the exhibition of how I behave will be good, right? See, it's either on or off. It's either up or down. It's either left or right. There is no in between when we talk about mental and health, the state of our thinking. There is no context for, well, I just think in the middle, right? There is no, well, I just think okay. No, I either think good or bad. I either think right or wrong. And I think that if we can get that down pat, that when we talk about mental health, it's where we begin to become aware of how we are thinking. See, because we behave in direct accordance with how we think. So my behavior will display what I'm thinking. Okay. So when you hear the term mental health, whether it's somebody talking about your children, your parents, or even you, just have an understanding that people are just talking about the state of how you think, which will define and identify how you are behaving. So let's answer this big question. Does faith and mental health have an intersection? In fact, I believe they do. You see, we see the first signs of unwellness all the way back in Genesis chapter 4. Okay. Now, this channel is for the believer, but it's also for the non believer. See, because if a non believer can tap into this information and they'll begin to examine the scriptures as well, they'll find God's truth in there. Okay. And so I'm not proclaiming that this channel is a ministry, but we do want to minister to the needs of people who are looking to live well. So let's get into Genesis chapter 4. I may show it to you on the screen, but I'll definitely talk about it. We understand Genesis chapter 4 is where God is addressing Cain. Okay. Cain and Abel had offered sacrifices to the Lord. Abel's sacrifice was accepted and Cain's sacrifice is rejected. Now, before you say, well, why would God do that? Well, let me explain. These two boys understand and understood and understand what sacrifice the Lord had required. Okay. And so when they brought their sacrifices to the Lord, okay, Cain's sacrifice was not sufficient because it wasn't what God had required. When Abel brought his sacrifice, it is exactly what was required of the Lord. That's why the Bible refers to Abel's sacrifice as more excellent. Okay, so God is addressing Cain in chapter 4. He's asking Cain, "Why are you so angry?" You see, we understand anger is symptomatic of what's going on in how we're thinking. That's just the truth. So if I'm angry, that must means there's something going on provoking me to think and or feel and or behave in a certain type of way. God goes on to say, why has your face fallen? Depending on what translation you read, it may read just a little different, but that's what God is asking him. See, Cain's face has dropped. Cain's face is looking, one might say, disfigured. In fact, depending on what community you come from, one may say Cain needed to straighten his face. You see, Cain is in a place where he's pouting. He's pouting because God just didn't accept anything from him. You see, and so now Cain is in a place where he's in his feelings. Anger and sadness. That's the nature of your face dropping, is when you suffer some disappointment, when you suffer some sadness. So God is saying, hey, Cain. So God goes on to say, hey, Cain, if you do well, it'll go well with you. See, he gives Cain the answer. You don't have to stay stuck in your anger. You don't have to stay stuck in disappointment and your madness. You can just simply do well, meaning do what's expected, do what's required. And see, in some of us, that's how we get messed up. You see, we can have an understanding of what's required of us. We can have an understanding of what is needed of us or what is expected of us, but we make a decision to do the opposite. And when people reject, when people do not accept what we bring them, because maybe it's not acceptable, maybe it's not expected, maybe it's not the right thing, then we get in our feelings. And we have an understanding if we stay in our feelings too long, it's going to come out in our behavior. And so we understand what Cain's behavior was. Cain was mad enough and stayed mad enough to go and kill his brother. You see, Cain's thinking and Cain's feelings produced his murderous behavior. You see, and so when it comes to us in a modern day setting, you see, we're expecting in this life anybody and everybody just to accept whatever. We act like we can just say whatever to people. We can treat people any kind of way, and that's not true. So when people reject what we're bringing to the table, it simply says to us, bring a better offering. When husbands and wives get mad and they talk about we're not staying together because of irreconcilable differences, that's not a real thing. It's not a real thing. You see, it's not a real thing that you have irreconcilable differences simply because you need to bring a better offering. You see, if what I'm bringing you is unacceptable, no matter what type of relationship we have, is if it's the relationship to the Lord, if I'm bringing Him raggediness and ratchetness, if it's my husband or my wife, depending on which way, whether you're male or female, and you're married, it's going to depend upon, am I bringing a proper offering? Am I serving them in the way that they need to be served? And if what I'm bringing is unacceptable and they reject it, certainly you can feel what you feel. But if you stay there too long, it's going to produce negative behavior. Because remember, we only think good or bad, positive or negative. There is no in between. And how we think will impact how we feel, and how we feel will impact how we think. And they both come together to create how we behave. So if you're looking for an equation, so here's your equation. 1 plus 1 still equals 2. Negative thoughts plus negative feelings equals negative behaviors. There is no separation in that. We can think positively and do affirmations and all the things that people tell us to do to change mood or to change perspective or to change attitude. But at the end of it all, your negative thoughts plus your negative feelings will produce negative behaviors. You understand what I'm saying? You see, it's really that simple. See, we get so convoluted with all these mental health diagnoses, and everybody talks to me in the context of, well, Boulanger, I got this diagnosis or I got that diagnosis and I take this kind of medication, and things seem to be getting worse, not better. Things seem to be on a continual pattern, a downward slope. And what people don't understand is most of the time we're not being told how to understand mental health. You have to understand mental health separate from a diagnosis. Mental health just comes down to a negative pattern of thinking or a positive pattern of thinking. Now, am I telling you positive thinking changes everything? No. See, I think negatively, or we think negatively in accordance with the situation we find ourselves in. And so the greater of all our issues is, why do we keep finding ourselves in situations that cause or provoke negative thinking? You see, when we change our thinking, we'll change also how we feel, because your thinking should be able to manage or control how you feel. You see, when I talk to people, a lot of the times they tell me, well, I feel this or I feel that or I feel this. And so what they're telling me is that they feel more than they think. We'll go deeper into that in another episode. But what I'm getting to today is mental health is not some great mystery. You see, we could see it right there in the scripture when God is speaking to Cain. He's asking Cain, why is he mad? That's the feeling. And why has your face fallen? That's also a feeling, sadness, which is a representation of how he's thinking. Well, how do we know? Because he goes off and murders his brother, which indicates that his anger and his sadness produced negative behavior, which means his thinking also had to be corrupt. So let me close up right here with a few godly tips. Number one, spend time thinking about what you think about. Nobody does that really. Nobody spends time thinking about what they think about. Typically, people spend a lot of time feeling what they feel. And when they realize that what they feel don't feel good, they find ways to distract from those feelings. See, when you spend time thinking about what you think about, you will become aware of if your thinking is negative or positive, if it's good or bad, if it's well or unwell, because there is no middle ground. It's either one side or another. So spend time thinking about what you think about. And the second tip I'll give you is this. Once you realize the state of your thinking, the condition of your thinking, that's your mental health. It'll directly let you know the state of your health. Either I'm healthy in my thinking or I'm unhealthy. And if you find yourself to be unhealthy, then you can begin to address it. You see, because if you have unhealthy thinking, you probably have unhealthy behavior. And if you have unhealthy thinking, you probably have unhealthy feelings. And so then you can begin to search out what is the cause, what is provoking this negative thinking. It could be people in your life, it could be places that you frequent, or it could be activity that you engage in, or it could be all three. See, because typically the people in our lives we engage in activity with in particular places. See, they all go together. See, it's not common that we have goal oriented people, godly people in our life, but then we go to the bar and the club and the smoke shops and so on and so forth and hang out all times of the day and night. Those two things don't go together. So, however you find yourself in situations will indicate the type of people, places, and activity you're engaging in. So work on those two things, man. We'll jump back in here, man. We got a ton more information to come. Got a ton more information about how faith intersects mental health. I'm your guy, Boulanger. This is R.A.R.E, Real Answers for Real Experiences, and I'm out.